Hi, my name is Esty Woods, and I am the producer for this podcast today. We are going to discover how to maximize your B2B sales approach and close more deals. So, we're going to be talking mastering modern sales techniques. We have two fantastic guests. Justin Pugh, he is a sales coach, an AI automation expert, and a fractional sales manager with over 20 years of experience across B2B, SaaS, and IoT. He is a former Army combat veteran and has managed 150 plus million portfolios, scaled over 150 businesses, and built elite sales teams. He helps sales professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners create high converting sales systems, master natural selling, and leverage AI to drive revenue. Through coaching, workshops, and content, Justin simplifies sales, removes frictions, and helps clients close more deals with confidence. We also have Ryan Adamson. He is the CEO and founder of Sales Caddy AI that is revolutionizing sales tech. Previously, as a CRO and co-founder of Cradlepoint, Idaho's largest tech unicorn, he drove massive growth and market leadership. As a seasoned entrepreneur, Ryan has a track record of scaling startups, pioneering connectivity solutions, and mentoring future leaders. With deep expertise in sales and strategy, he helps shape the tech landscape from startups like Extended Systems and Right Now Technologies to game-changing industry innovations. So right now, we are going to get started, and we're going to go through today the evolution of sales techniques, conversational selling, spin selling, integrating technologies in sales, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So why don't we kick this off with the evolution of sales techniques?
Yeah, so I'll take this one to start off here, Justin. And, I've seen a lot over the years, and there's definitely been some changes, but in a lot of ways, selling has been pretty static for the sellers over the last 20, 30 years that I've been involved in it. There definitely has been a transition from old school techniques like blue sheets from Miller Hyman and others like that to more consultative and conversational. But the most important thing I think I've seen over the years is just that relationship building and that focus on figuring out what the customer's needs are and understanding the customer's environment and business models so that solutions can be personalized for individual sellers. And as Zig Ziglar said, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great.
Hey, I got a question for you, Ryan, to that
Sure.
point. So once you get to a certain level, you've already gotten to the highest level of B2B sales. Once you get to that level, how does the conversation change when you're sitting at a table with a complex deal? How does conversational selling or the traditional sales method work in those kind of high ticket luxury environments?
Well, what I found, Justin, is that you really have to focus on what are the needs of the business, and every business, as they grow and evolve, has certain priorities and initiatives they're trying to accomplish each year, and those change and from year in to year out, and so you got to stay in tune to that. And the executive team is responsible for making sure that those changes are performed and are achieved through their organizations. And so having those discussions at that high level, you really have to understand not only what they want to get done, but how they want to get it done and be able to tailor your solution to be able to deliver on those results.
I got one more question. So the objections you might see, right? So some of the folks that are on the line here that are with us, some of these folks are in high ticket where they're seeing, opportunities, over $1 million. And so what are the objections that you're going to probably see when you have high ticket offers as high as $1 million or more?
Well, I think the most important thing for companies that are going to spend a significant amount of money on your solution, the most important thing to them is that, one, it's going to be something that's going to scale with them as they grow. They don't want to spend a bunch of money and a bunch of time implementing a solution that's going to be outdated, a year or two later. So for selling those more strategic solutions to those types of companies, you have to be able to show a roadmap and a ability to deliver on that roadmap that instills confidence in the company that they're picking the right vendor to go with, not only for today, but as their business grows and evolves and changes, that you're going to be able to keep up with that and deliver on that.
You make a great point about the roadmap piece, because you talked a lot about the relationship building side of it. And a large part of sales, especially from now we have this virtual environment where I've never met you in person, but 20, 30 years ago, I'd have to fly out to the West Coast to have a meeting with you, or we're doing all of this via phone calls. So walk me through like that roadmap of that relationship building phase really quick for our viewers to kind of give them an idea of this is what you can expect, or this is what you can see today, even without technology, from a relationship building perspective.
Yeah, that's a good, valid point. I mean, things really changed with COVID in 2020, but it's always been important. I still believe still is today, even with some of the advent of the tools that we have like Zoom and other things that are more virtual oriented, to build those relationships with the key stakeholders that are involved in any business or any transaction that you're doing. And anytime you're working on, high ticket items, there's going to be multiple people, anywhere from, experts will say anywhere from 7 to 11 or 12 different stakeholders involved in that decision-making process. And, at the end of the day, when they're making a decision to go with you as a vendor and your solution, select your solution, they're also selecting you, right, as a representative for them with that company. And so you have to build a lot of trust with, the key stakeholders involved, and make sure that they understand that you are an advocate for them, and that you can be counted on and trusted as an advisor to them, and back inside your own company to make sure that their needs are met.
That's pretty interesting. I appreciate that. I think we can now sort of think about the evolution now from where we came from now post COVID. Now customers are smarter, customers have more information, customers are more in tune. We're now dialed into technology. I think I heard a stat basically say that AI was the #1 leading conversation in the B2B business realm. And so now, like you said at the very end, that trust factor is more important than anything else now in business. Because I wouldn't say there are charlatans out there, but there are folks out there who are not getting the value that they preach about, which brings me to the point of having to go deeper in that trust cycle of having those conversations. Now I think we hear numbers like there's 21 touch points you got to have with someone, or think about content that what we're doing here right now. Studies show that you need 7 hours of watch time of someone engaging with you for them to even trust you, just from a generic virtual standpoint. And so that's why the sales methods of the old of having those one-to-one conversations have changed now, because the customer is smarter. The buyer's much more in tune. The buyer now has competitive information at their fingertips with like Zoom info, sales caddy. I can just type something in and see, hey, what revenue my competitor has and things like that. And so now having those conversations and going into conversational selling and becoming more customer centric is exactly how we need, the market has transitioned us. And so Michael Oliver, one of my kind of virtual sales mentors, he perfected sort of the conversational selling, or natural selling in a sense. And what it really focuses on is putting yourself on this side of the table with your customer, where you and me sit on the same side of the table, where you and I are working more in a collaborative effort. Like there's no kind of advert, because sales in the day, would always be closing and the tried and true Glengarry, that whole thing with Alec Baldwin back in the day. Just having that aggressive boiler room sales tactics those things don't work anymore. People are being turned off from those things. And so now having those conversations, talking about the business, developing pain and producing enough pain for the business, talking about cost of inaction, talking about, return on their investment, like you said, giving that roadmap to, can this scale with my business? Now you have more of a natural friendship. I used to have a director of sales who used to always say it's easier to do business with friends. Now we know it's harder to do it because it's harder to fire a friend, but it's much easier to do business with them, right? And so now you have to learn those more emotional triggers. What triggers people emotionally? Driving people away from pain, but towards pleasure. Giving them the idea of what their business can look like at the end of this roadmap. So now you have folks like Jeremy Miner, who've made, hundreds of millions of dollars off of this same technique called NAPQ. He's one of the largest sales training platforms. I've implemented some of these tactics and techniques in my own sales training. And I can tell you they absolutely work. And I've seen and I want you to tell me if you've seen the same thing, that when you've seen individual experts and sales reps and sales professionals have better conversations, they also have better business outcomes. Is that something that you're seeing in the field? I know I said a lot there, but is that something that you're seeing in the industry today?
For sure. Some of our top reps, we're definitely best friends with their customers. And, we always believed at Cradlepoint that, people do business with people they like, right? And people that trust. And so, we always worked hard to make sure that, we were, the customer advocate. We were there. They had the problem. We had technology that could potentially help solve their problem. We didn't know for sure when we started, but we had to start to find out, right, if we could really help them. And, and I think you're spot on in that, we have to sit on the same side of the table with the customer, and we have to understand what their needs and their problems and their initiatives are. And we have to be transparent and honest with them when we can help, we can. And, every business is built differently. Just because it works for one customer in one market segment doesn't mean it's going to work for another customer in the same segment, right?
Right.
They run their businesses differently. So that trust that you build by really sitting on that other side of the table to completely understand and see that customer's business from their point of view and their needs and their resources to address that, you can build a much more relevant solution that has a lot higher value to that customer and is more likely to win their business.
You make an excellent point, because now as I kind of digest all of this, and I hope you guys out there are digesting it the same way I am as well. And that is that the theory of it all hasn't changed. The foundation hasn't changed. Nothing beats a handshake, and nothing's going to beat a face-to-face meeting. And but at the same time, you still have to be able to develop a customer-centric solution. And the only way to do that is to talk to somebody, right? The only way to get to know somebody is to talk to them. And having conversations is not just having conversations, but it's having conversations that matter, asking questions that matter. Walk me through, if not necessarily kind of like a scenario, but what's the biggest deal you've done where the conversation had to be honest, where you had to tell the customer, look, you have to do this. But the only way you can do that is if the customer trusts you. Have you had a customer like that where you could bring them and hold them accountable and tell them, hey, you need to do this for your business, or it's gonna, and the only way to do that is to build trust? How did that happen?
Yeah, that's an interesting, question. And, not everybody believes that a small little company from Boise, Idaho can solve some big problems that are very complex and hard, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say it wasn't our biggest, but it was probably our most memorable customer to me anyway, was FedEx. And FedEx, has, these delivery standards that, if they don't meet, then it costs them a lot of money. And, I think their executive team told me that, every second of delay or network outage would cost them, millions of dollars.
Wow.
And so looking at Cradlepoint as a failover solution to give more resilience to their network was a very, very important, very valuable tool to them because it mitigated risk. Yep. And it kept all their systems, all their planes, all their people on task and on time for deliveries that they were committing to. And so they actually flew out to Boise. They had to confirm with the Boise airport, first of all, that their corporate jet would be able to land at the Boise.
Fit there.
Yep. But their executive team flew out and they came to our headquarters. They marched in there in suits. They wanted to meet us face to face.
Yeah.
In our environment. To, again, like I said, make sure that that our team and our company could deliver not only today on what their needs were, but we're going to be able to be a partner with them over the next, 5 to 10 years to make sure that they had minimal, downtime on their network.
That's powerful, man. That's powerful.
Yeah, and again, that says to the relationship. Yeah, we did a lot of meetings where I went there and met their teams. We did a lot of Zoom and a lot of email correspondence over the time period of working on that opportunity and that deal. But at the end of the day, they wanted to come sit with us and see us in our element to make sure we weren't, just, behind a paper bag, right?
Yeah.
And that we could deliver on that. And I think those things don't happen every day obviously, but I think it's important that you continually are transparent and open with your customers, because in this day of AI and this day of all this information that's available both to sellers and to buyers about solutions, about products, things do tend to get overhyped and over marketed at some points, and can get mispositioned or misunderstood in terms of what they can do and what they can't. And the last thing you want to do is you don't want to let down a customer in terms of selling them a solution that can't deliver on the outcomes that they're desiring. So I think it's imperative for both sides to make sure that they do their due diligence and make sure that that it's a partnership that's a win-win for both sides.
Which brings me to you said something important about making sure that the relationship and the solution are kind of aligned. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is that alignment comes with understanding and research. And that research comes from developing the right metrics and the right analytics to understand the customer's the buyer's journey overall. Right. And one of the things that I learned from Neil Rackman's Spin Selling was sales is a process. It's a science. It really is. One of my favorite sales mentors, Victor Antonio, says, selling ain't hard when you know how. You know what I mean? And so thinking about spin selling with Neil Rackman, what he developed was this process where you understand. Once you get that customer on a phone call, once you get them in a conversation, you try to understand exactly what the customer needs, and you walk them down this road where at the very end, the close seems not only natural, but it's a no-brainer. Like we shouldn't be having another conversation about this outside of how we get it done on the budget side. And so for folks out there, when you're on your sales calls, I try to encourage folks, even at the highest levels, even with big B2B companies like Cradlepoint, even on the SaaS side, it doesn't change. Systems don't change. And if you need a system, spin selling has been around. no matter if you're NEPQ, natural selling, you still need to understand what the customer needs, the situation. You still need to understand the problem, not necessarily, and some folks, misinterpret what the problem actually is. For you, the problem wasn't necessarily lost revenue. That was the symptom of the problem. The problem might have been you were missing a key component on the sales side, or you were missing a tremendous leader to lead the sales division. Or maybe you were out of sync and out of alignment in your own personal life, and that was affecting the business. So problems necessarily may not even be business related, but they cause symptoms in the business. So again, you can only get there by asking deeper questions. And then you still have to imply, like, how does this impact the business? And then last but not least, from a system perspective, how does this, again, as you said earlier, how does this roadmap scale with my business? How do I see ROI, pay it off in the business? So help me understand this, Ryan. Now that I've kind of described what spin selling is, has anything changed in the marketplace?
No, it really hasn't. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, the customer has a problem, the vendor has a solution, right? But how you go through that process to uncover what the problem is and how the problem needs to be solved, is by building a relationship with the people that are involved in that business, right? And understanding how they do things and why they do it the way they do. So that, you understand and have confidence that your solution is going to be able to provide high value for them. And and it is, like you said, it is a process. You can't skip doing that discovery. You can't skip, asking those hard questions or doing that groundwork to really understand the customer's needs and environments and motives, because you will miss something if you try to, close it early without having all that information.
You're right. And so that brings me to my next point. And this is something that, there's a big question going around in the marketplace. Is AI replacing, sales? Is AI replacing certain roles? I want to start there first. I want to kind of demystify AI. Walk me, so now we understand the process, and you said something important there about, truly getting deep into the research, understanding, that competitive analysis. Walk me through where you see AI playing such a pivotal role, or demystify AI for us, Ryan, as we continue the conversation.
Sure. AI is everywhere, and it is definitely the buzzword, but at the end of the day, it's a technology, right? It's, similar to Zoom or similar to, Power or anything else. It's a technology that can be utilized to help businesses and utilized to solve business problems when done in a proper way, but it by itself doesn't solve anything, right? Okay. It's a tool. It's a tool in the belt. And from a sales perspective, as we've talked, the sales process really hasn't changed much, but the world that we sell in has evolved significantly, right? And it was back late 90s when the internet came about and the web became a vehicle for people to research companies, research products, potentially even buy products. Early 2000s, those types of things where transactions were starting to be done on the web. That gave the buyer a lot more information and a lot more understanding of how they could potentially solve their problem without even involving a seller, right? It was just looking at that information, making their own determination of, hey, I think this product, based on the messaging and what it looks like and what it says it does, potentially could help me, right? And they would bring in the seller later, and that's only extended, and to the point where, today they're saying that the buyer's already, 60, 70% down their decision-making process before they even talk to a representative that actually understand what they're looking at is going to solve and meet their needs today, not even including their needs going forward, because, it's hard to see all that stuff and understand all that. But, what AI has done, in my opinion, is it's also now giving the seller the same advantage that the buyers had for the last 20 years. Access to a lot of information about the buyer that now you can disseminate down into understanding what are their needs, what are their challenges, what are their pain points, and more about them as a persona in terms of what is important to them in their role and what they're doing, so that you can better position the solutions you have and spend your time where you can add the most value and have a much better chance of winning business.
Man,
So
that's crazy. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so I think it's, it's a powerful tool that, is here to stay. It's a technology that really has transformational impacts. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, and I believe transformational impact to the sellers out there in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that, start to learn it and embrace it now and understand how to weave it into their daily activities and the processes that haven't changed, but can really catch them up with the buyer and put them on equal footing in terms of information and understanding of both sides of the table, which at the end of the day collapses the amount of time it takes to get a deal done on both sides. And we all know that time kills deals. So
Time kill deals. Yep.
if you can collapse the amount of time that's involved in understanding and meeting a need for a customer, you understand much, you have a much better chance to win it. And then on top of that, I would add the other metric that is, tried and true is that those that get to the deal first or get to tell their story about the need or the opportunity first win 80+% of the time. So if you're using AI to research the company that you're trying to sell to better understand what's in their 10K, what are their initiatives this year, what are the pain points, are there any executive changes, are there new product releases, are there new competitors they're worried about, you can start to really understand their business, on their terms, so that you can position your solutions to help, address those issues.
To that point, technology, with AI now, the solution development rep, and I'm pretty sure there's tons of them. There may be one on this call. The account executive role, the client executive role, the solutions engineer role. Those are kind of all being, like even Salesforce is starting to kind of, consolidate those roles all into one. You have Agent Force out there. You have Sales Caddy. All these AI tools are starting to pop up, and they seem to be, and I'm not saying they seem to be replacing the research role. And the research role is that solutions development person, that development manager, that person that goes out and develops the business. In your prediction, or what do you see as AI gets smarter? It becomes much, much more intuitive, because some of the things you can do with AI right now, like develop PDFs. I mean, I think in 5 years, you can develop a pretty world-class website with AI. Even from a coding perspective, I mean, just thinking about some of the more ubiquitous tasks we see in technology. What do you see in the industry from a sales perspective? Is AI replacing the business development role?
I don't know that it's replacing the business development role, but it's replacing building blocks of repetitive tasks that need to be done by sellers and marketing people. So if there are specific things that are very well defined and have to be repeated over and over again in order to scale a seller's time or a seller's ability to sell to multiple accounts or to grow a business, those things are being automated by AI because they are very well defined. They consistently happen the same way, and you can use technology now. You can train it to accomplish those very, very quickly, which is good. And I think that's where there's a lot of hype and buzzwords or buzz around AI is being able to do some of this low-end repetitive tasks that solution development SDRs, BDRs are having to do. But in reality, they can only do pieces and parts of it. It's not a holistic solution, right? It's small pieces of the solution that it can accomplish. You still need people to tie that together. And at the end of the day, it just makes them more efficient so they can do what we want all sellers to do, which is spend more time in front of customers, right?
Yeah.
So if you can reduce the amount of repetitive tasks that take you away from being in front of the customer, whether it's drafting emails, making a presentation, researching a company or a contact at a company, all those things. If you can shrink that down, now you have more time to be in front of that customer in a more educated way that can speak on their terms. And I think that's the high value that AI can bring when it's utilized as an ingredient into a holistic solution, right? As opposed to trying to replace an individual task or
Right.
person role.
It's funny you say that it's not replacing, because there's so many. I visited a website where there's like 1,800 apps that, all the way from sales enablement, to soup to nuts. AI can pretty much, handle the sales process. With that being said, is there going to be a time where there are certain sales? Let's think about Cradle Point for a moment. Is there an evolution where there's a certain ICP in the marketplace that we'll never talk to, that will just be handled by AI, where AI will become so not necessarily human, but will replicate such a human processing power that certain ICPs will just be kind of like, kind of an online order, do you want fries with that type customer, very transactional customer, so that you can handle the more higher ticket. Is that something that you'll see? And could that be something that helps scale businesses faster as well?
For sure. Yeah. And again, I can't see the whole future. None of us can, right? But,
right.
If you listen to the experts, like Elon and Musk and others, they're saying that the AI in the next 3 to 5 years will be smarter than the smartest human, right? Ooh. So its ability to reason and have access to knowledge and be able to process that faster than any human can do is, not very far away, right? So the ability to, yes, do things that we today do ourselves, can be done by, will be done by AI. Is that what sellers and buyers is that they're gonna be the preferred method of doing things? I'm not sold on that. Like I said, the thing that AI lacks right now, but will build over time, is trust, right? People don't trust AI, that it has all the information, that it's using it properly, and that it can deliver what I need when I need it, the way a human can, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is just familiarity with the technology and, using it over a period of time. But as that happens, I think it will build trust in the marketplace to do and replace repetitive tasks, like I need to add on to my order, the same thing, right? Or I need to, make this change from this product to that product. Things that it doesn't really take a lot of brain power or, human interaction to process.
Yeah.
AI is going to replace a lot of that.
So again, kind of just thinking about, the evolution of sales over the last 30 years. The only thing that I've seen that changes is that, from what I'm hearing here now, is that, Zig Ziglar said the handshake is important. And then you have other folks that said, now we got the handshake, now let's get on the same side of the table with them and let's get involved in their business. Let's kind of get deeply involved. Let's become their friends. Let's make sure that, the only person that you want to do business with is me. And then, of course, naturally now, technology is just making it easier to, laser focus, iron focus on your ICP. The person that you really truly want to be your customer, you can find that person. And you can find them, you can find out who they are, what they do, and then if your solution is the right fit for them. And so for the business leaders on right now, who you've engaged with over the years, what's some of your advice to them as they begin to develop their AI strategy going forward, 2025 and beyond, and how that integrates into their sales enablement?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, what I would say is that, you need to get people working on this sooner rather than later, right? Because your competitors people are embracing this to make their organizations more efficient and effective. So you need to make it a priority and make it a core initiative across the business, not just in sales, but across the business, to see where it can apply value and where it can be taken advantage of to make you more effective and productive. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is that, you're going to have to make sure that you're flexible in whatever you pick, because it's early market. There's a lot of things changing. There's a lot of large language models out there. There's not a lot of new technologies coming. AI is advanced from, just basic machine to machine to large language models with reasoning to agentic AI that can perform tasks and do things autonomously. It's all evolving over time here. So you don't know exactly where, to make your bet, right? Because it is changing so fast. So you want to be flexible and dynamic and have someone tasked with staying on top of it all to make sure that you're taking advantage of the things that really can add value for you today, but you're also keeping an eye out for those things that are going to evolve and come to market that, you weren't aware of and maybe need to upgrade to tomorrow.
I agree. And one of the things from a sales enablement perspective for the business leaders, and even for those of you who are watching, who are sales professionals, and you're on the front line, whether you're on the, on the business, on the biz dev side, or you're on the, client executive side, the most important thing is use AI to your advantage, right? Even at the smallest level, even when it comes to like using Sales Caddy to, to develop a really good presentation, something that you can, again, I remember, in my B2B years, and I'm pretty sure this as well, as a high level executive, you don't have time. You have no time to prepare that presentation for, a 3-hour, 4-hour, strategy session. At one point you had, an executive assistant do those things. And so today, now your executive assistant has AI to make that even easier, so that now we can fine tune and tailor things so fast. And so from a sales enablement perspective, I think from training to client research, all the way down to helping you close and overcome objections, you need to be using AI in each of those phases of the sale to, of course, advance the sale and, of course, build a better case to close and gain a new customer. Which brings me to our last thing, Esty, is I know we haven't heard from Esty at all, but now that we've kind of uncovered where sales has come from, how it's integrated with technology, how we're moving into the future, what do we have forward to look? What's the roadmap? I know Capgemini talks about it being 95% of the conversations, but what's next for AI?
Is that a question for me?
I don't know. I'm ad-libbing.
Go ahead, Esty.
Because I was like, I don't know.
Let's get into Q&A. How about that?
That's great. We have a lot of questions that have come in, and so they're really good questions. So
awesome.
Yeah, put your questions in the question tab or in the chat, and we will get to as many as possible. So, what's the biggest mistake sales professionals make when trying to implement conversational selling?
They do the wrong thing. They converse with themselves too much, right? Even at the beginning of the sale, I'm a big firm believer in it's the 80-20 rule. You must let the customer talk 80% of the time. Also the biggest thing I noticed with sales reps, even professionals, even the good ones, they don't spend enough time getting to know the customer. Discovery, if you have a 60-minute conversation with somebody, you should be spending 30 to 40 minutes of that time getting to know them, getting them into a narrative. I kind of say it like this. When I was in college, I loved con law and I was going to go to law school. I scored pretty high on the LSAT, but I had a bunch of kids, and then that dream got scuttled. It's not scuttled yet, but you do get my point. But my point is that I used to love direct examination, because that's the part where you get the customer to go into a narrative. You get the defendant or the person on the stand to go into a narrative. Tell me a story, and stories sell. And so you can get if reps can stop making the one mistake and skipping over or blowing too fast through discovery, I think a lot of folks, because I think a number is 70% of sales reps don't even hit quota. 70%. I think that's a Salesforce stat or a HubSpot stat. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but if that number can be greatly reduced if folks, spent more time in the discovery phase. What do you think, Ryan?
I agree. And I think that number's low. I think it's closer to 80% don't hit quota. And,
Wow.
and again, it is, it's not that they don't understand their solution and the value that their solution brings to the market. It's that they don't understand their customer. And again, I think that's where AI can really help them in, is boiling down all this information that's available about your customer, about your target, about your key stakeholder that's available. All their information is available on LinkedIn and other sites, using AI to analyze that and tell you what are the key points that matter relative to your solution and who you're, in the discussion you're having. So you're spot on. It's that you have to have a lot better understanding of your customer than, the solution that you're selling. And you get that by either researching it or you get it by spending time with them and listening to them.
100%.
You said it right, Justin. They blow past the discovery phase. And I think nowadays, instead of always be selling, always be discovering, right? That's
love it.
That perfect stage. Okay, we've got another great question in here. How does spin selling differ from traditional sales methods, and how can I apply it to my industry?
Spin selling is it's a process, it's a framework. So it's not necessarily your techniques lie inside of the process, right? Your technique lies in tonality and question structure and, how you tilt your head with curiosity and things like that, body language. So your techniques are not so much so changing the framework. The framework's going to be the same. If you think of sales or you think of your conversation as a funnel, or as a triangle, discovery should be the 90% of the iceberg that's literally sitting at the top, where the tip, that bottom, should be all of what you don't see, and that's that smaller piece is closing the sale. So my point is that spin selling still uncovers the situation. Hey, Ryan, why are we on this call today? It still uncovers the problem. Hey, what is this problem in your business? I can't sleep at night. I can't take my family on vacation. I'm overworked. My VP of sales suck. The marketing team is blowing it this quarter. And those have ripple effects or symptoms in the business. But those are the true problems, right? The symptoms are lost revenue, lost time, overspending on marketing X, Y, Z. And then you still need to understand how it pays off for the customer, right? What is the journey? How is the customer going to benefit from this in 3 to 5 years? How's it going to save them money? How's it going to save them time? How's it going to make the CEO's life better? And then, of course, naturally, at the end, what does the customer need to do at the very end? How is the benefit long-term for the entire organization? And so when you put spin selling both in a B2C and a B2B environment, it's still the same. As long as you're trying to understand the customer and then understand how your solution helps solve that problem, and then you can make it make sense from an ROI perspective, you're going to win more than you lose. And so remember, keep the framework the same, but that's where you need a coach to help you understand how to make tonality work, how to ask the question the right way. And that's where techniques come into place. And that's where sales training comes in, asking the right questions the right way at the right time.
Excellent. All right. We've got another good one. What's the best way to handle objections using Jeremy Miner's NEPQ framework?
The two ways. One, most of those questions are designed to pre-handle the objections in the first place. Your discovery phase should be designed to pre-handle. I always tell students or clients of mine, if you're getting, let's say, a think about an objection at the very end, like, I'm going to call you to task. you shouldn't even be getting that kind of objection in the first place if you do enough discovery where, think about it as normally going to be a money or going to be more of an authority figure at the very end. When you get to the higher ticket realm, it's going to be budget, getting the right stakeholders on the line. We shouldn't be having those kinds of discussions at the very end. At the end of a 2-hour conversation, I shouldn't be hearing, oh, I got to get CEO Ryan Adamson on the call. I should have known that 2 minutes, 5 minutes into the call. Hey, Ryan, is there somebody else that we need to have on the call, this call, as we advance to a development call? Is there somebody else that needs to be involved? That should be a question right out the gate, right? So having all those stakeholders and overcoming objections should be first about pre-handling them and preventing them in the first place. And then if we do get down that line where we have to overcome objections, we want to be overcoming the right objections. The right objections are always going to come down to 3 of them. It's going to come down to money, finance, budget, right? It's going to come down to timing, right? Maybe we're in Fed buying season, but you're trying to sell it to me in January, right? Or you're trying to sell it to me, outside of our budget. Or it's going to come down to, at the end of the day, fear, right? Is this going to really work for me? I got burned by another vendor that I put all of my eggs in one basket before. So I don't want to necessarily go down that road. I want to, you've heard it before. I want to split test this with one vendor. I want to go Cradle Point versus Netgear, So, we want to make sure that we get to the real meat and potatoes of what the objection truly is. It's never going to be about, let me think about it. The think about it objection should be, when's the next call? Or the fear objection is uncovering more value. Budgeting and finance should be, we can find the budget. Let's see what marketing can, let's see what we can pull from marketing or pull from biz dev to put this solution together how we need to. Ryan, what have you seen in your experience at the highest level? What objections do you see at the very highest levels?
Yeah, it's usually comes down to, like you said, financing. This usually comes down to, how are we going to spend? How are we going to do this? And, usually, those higher ticket items, you're working on those for, 6-9 months ahead of time. So usually they're able to pre-plan in that. But a lot of times, there will be a critical moment where, they didn't budget for it, right? They weren't ready for it yet. And so now it's like they got to accelerate it. So it comes down to, being creative on how can we help them, take advantage of our solution today and be creative on the financing side that fits into, where they're at from a budget standpoint, and finding partners to help in that too. You don't always have to solve it all yourself. So
absolutely.
So it's, those are challenges that everybody faces, and every seller is going to, come into those at the last minute that sometimes are outside of your control. There can be something that happens in the market that impacts, like a security breach that now, okay, security spend is, paramount, even though it wasn't going into the year first, and you get bumped, and it's hard to work around those things.
Yeah. And something that I try to tell folks all the time, you got to get creative. When it comes to sales, it's no different whether it's at the highest levels where you're selling, hundreds of millions of dollars in product and you're moving big boxes and you're talking to big labels like FedEx, or you're talking to smaller shops where maybe we need to use internal financing, internal financing programs, guys. So when you are on the phone with your customer, again, understanding where they are in their business, you must get on the same side with them. Understanding what their budgets are. If you're creating that relationship, you're going to know what their budgets are. You're going to know where they can find their products and services. And in my B2B world, I saw accounts that were, full of internal financing where all of their deals were financed by the distributor in some way, shape, fashion, or form. And so, like you said, using other people's money to leverage the sale, and to be creative. That's how you overcome objections as well. So I hope that answers your question, Esty.
Well, and a second part to that, I'm going to ask, how do you overcome the status quo when you're in a deal and it's not the competitor, it's I'm comfortable where I'm at, And if I don't do anything, maybe it'll go away. So they decide not to do anything. Like, how do
Yeah.
you overcome that in the sales process?
The old broke but don't fix it, the old if it ain't broke don't fix it kind of mantra. Yeah, you see that a lot. I already have a solution. Hey Ryan, that's great. That's understandable. What is there anything in your business that can we take an audit of that relationship? Have you thought about a new relationship? Have you given thought to a new solution? Would it be good for us to continue the conversation? And then you compare my solution to theirs. Again, asking for a little instead of a lot. And that's where a good seller who says, you know what, I'm not going to ask for the whole relationship. I know Cradle Point might own, an 80% share of this relationship. Can I get that other 20? Can I get that other 20%? Just so you can get your foot in the door. So it's always going to be a foot in the door offer. It's always going to be about lowering resistance, trying to get a slow yes instead of a fast no. And fast no's come with too big of an ask. And so when you have someone who's in a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mode, you have to be able to get them to see that maybe maybe this person isn't fulfilling all of your needs, right? Maybe Cradle Point or Netgear or one of these other solutions doesn't do everything. Maybe AI is the difference in a Cradle Point solution. They have a better, management solution or than, their competitor. So always make sure that you're still asking questions. And the only way that you will know if it's, because sometimes, to your point, SD, it might be broken and they don't know, right? Like it might be broken, and because they've just been doing it in that relationship for so long, they've overlooked it. So Ryan, help me with this one, because I think this is one that you can add color to. Have you had a customer where it was broken and they didn't know it was broken?
Oh yeah, many times, and again, that's just priorities, right, of the customer. The customer can't fix everything and do everything they want to, right? So they have to pick and choose which things are going to move their business forward based on what their goals and the board, direction has given them. And so, you have to stay close, and you have to be ready to walk. Not everybody's going to be ready, for the solutions you have and ready to work with you. That doesn't mean that they won't be at some point. So you got to continue to stay close, nurture them, make sure you're educating them, bringing them along so that when that door does crack open, you're there and you're ready to work with them. So, I think, that's just part of selling. That's why you have to have a big pipeline, right? Because there are going to be things that are outside of your control. And sometimes, good is good enough for now based on other fires they're fighting and things that they have from a budget standpoint. Doesn't mean that they won't come back. It's just, you got to stay close.
Got to add value. Keep adding value. Good question, Esty.
Excellent. Well, we're coming up on time right now, so I want to let everybody know, connect with Justin, connect with Ryan on LinkedIn. If you have any questions that we didn't answer, we'll get an answer to you for those questions. So keep asking them and connect with both Ryan and Justin. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today.
Right.
Thank you, Esty. Thank you, Ryan.